statement because inflation targeting has become debatable throughout the world as a vehicle for containing inflation. Other countries have other models. For example, we used to have the currency peg, which was a system by which a country pegged its currency to the currency of a low inflation country. But the problem with that was the problems in your country or solutions in your country are tied to the country whose currency you pegged yours against. And so many countries run away from the currency peg model. Others will tie it to growth. But we decided to do inflation targeting. And by inflation targeting, it is defining an inflation path and using interest rates to drive inflation towards that path, to the desired inflation target. It is not only Ghana that is using it. Many other countries, including some of the advanced countries, are using inflation targeting. It has worked for us so far. It has worked well. There have been problems, but it has worked well for us so far, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not to say that there are no problems associated with inflation targeting. For example, Mr. Speaker, its focus on inflation is at the expense of other economic variables, such as growth and employment. And if you want to use rates to drive down inflation, you may face some rigidities, what we call structural rigidities. When rates are higher, they do not incentivize production because the private sector, that makes production is crowded out. And when rates are lower, intended to drive inflation down, it also does not incentivize production because of the structural rigidities in our economy. So because of our structural rigidities, our economy doesn't really respond to policy change. And that is the problem you find with inflation targeting, whether it is bringing about rate increases or rate decreases. The other issue with inflation targeting is its limited flexibility in response to shocks. We have experienced a number of shocks, and these are associated with the deputy majority leader, whether it is supply chain shocks or it is financial crisis. Inflation targeting has limited capacity to respond to those shocks because of its focus on inflation. And this is why central banks will normally respond. And so this is where I disagree with him. Central banks will respond when inflation targeting is not achieving its desired objective because of the shocks associated with the economy. And these shocks are mostly shocks that are external to the economy. And so if our central bank responded by putting more money into the market, I don't see anything wrong with that. And so our central bank acted responsibly. Also because the budget is so tight. And where the budget is tight and you're facing a crisis, there is no reason why the central bank should not respond. Whether they responded in excess of what they should have done or not is something we can discuss. But as far as the response by the central bank is concerned, they acted responsibly as a central bank. And so, Mr. Speaker, I don't see any problem with that. Mr. Speaker, this is where exchange rates affects our inflation. When we had crisis globally, the Russia-Ukraine war, which caused logistical constraint globally, and inflation rose, significantly across the world, to the extent that median inflation in the advanced countries went about 7.5%. And so when advanced countries are recording 7.5% median inflation, countries that normally will record 1% or less than 1%, recording 7.5 median inflation, then I wonder why anybody will have problems with the levels of inflation Ghana recorded during that crisis. Because through the exchange rate, we suffered in our inflation increasing. The reason also was that because of inflation increasing globally, the advanced countries, their central banks did that. They raised rates. And by raising rates, their financial instruments became more attractive. And so investors investing in Ghana and other open economies withdrew their investment to go and take advantage of the profits in the advanced countries. And that led to our exchange rate suffering. The cedi suffered as a result of that because of scarcity of foreign exchange, as a result of the withdrawal from our market. And so in that case, which body has responsibility for exchange rate management? Again, it is the Bank of Ghana, it is the central bank. And so the response by the central bank, in my view, it was very responsible, and we should commend them for coming to the support of our government and our country to ensure that the effect was not as pronounced as it would have been, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we need to do, if inflation targeting has to play its role, is for us to promote policy coordination between the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. You know, monetary policy and fiscal policy coordination is so critical for us. I don't see that coordination. The central bank is independent. The government does not dictate to the central bank. Yet, the policies of the central bank, if they are not coordinated with the policies of the Ministry of Finance or of the government, the economy suffers eventually. And players in the economy, consumers, suppliers, they all will suffer as a result. Mr. Speaker, let me give an example. There have been times the Ministry of Finance went to the market for T-bills, and we got uncovered options. We got shortfalls. But at the same time, the Bank of Ghana, through the Bank of Ghana bills, they are getting oversubscribed. And so Bank of Ghana will go to the market because they want to take out excess liquidity. Yet the Ministry of Finance, that wants money to finance the budget, goes to the market, and we encounter uncovered options. So why would the two bodies be on the market looking for the same money which we need to finance our budget? And so because of the lack of coordination, monetary policy, fiscal policy coordination, the budget suffers, and yet inflation is not being addressed. And so what we call second round effects becomes the order of the day, which we need to be addressing, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, inflation targeting is not a bad model, but it has problems that we can address. Before we get to addressing these problems entirely, what we need is coordination, policy coordination between monetary policy and fiscal policy. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.